espionage, diplomacy, and color-coded characters. Here are 6 ways to get the most out of Total War 3 Kingdoms. Whether you're new to Total War or a veteran of multiple conquests, you'll still want to run your 3 Kingdoms campaign at maximum efficiency. And Creative Assembly's masterful take on the collapse of the Han Dynasty is a dense, layered game with many systems that are entirely new to the series. In this video then, we'll attempt to break down the game's complexities and offer some practical advice for managing your burgeoning empire. We'll talk about the finer points of diplomacy, espionage, characters, finance, attributes, and recruitment. And we'll pin a comment with all the time links to each section below. Some of the stuff we'll talk about is new, and some of it isn't, but all the advice will help you get the most out of 3 Kingdoms. And remember, we won't be covering the basics here. Most of the information is available in-game, and you can press F11 at any time to bring up an overlay in the game that explains what everything is. Here are 6 things you need to know before playing Total War 3 Kingdoms.
It could end no other way.
Diplomacy in 3 Kingdoms is vibrant and reactive. Allegiances change rapidly, and the character-driven system means a faction can be your enemy one turn and an ally the next. And we know that people say diplomacy is more nuanced with every Total War game, but in this case, we promise it's true. Other factions frequently approach you with treaties. Some, such as coalitions and non-aggression pacts, are worth stopping to consider, but many of them are arrogant or insulting, reflecting the personalities of the characters proposing them.
You would not need fear us.
You'll find yourself short of cash and supplies if you acquiesce to every request, so in case it wasn't obvious, read exactly what's being asked of you and don't agree unless it's explicitly in your interest. That's standard Total War advice, but one of the most notable additions to diplomacy is the quick deal option. Hit this and you'll see a list of treaties that you're able to negotiate and the factions with whom you can deal. This saves you the time of manually going through a list of factions when you want to strike a new trade deal, for instance. A great time saver and an effective way of keeping on top of things.
Your proposal is sound.
Another new element is the Make It Work button. By pressing this, you can automatically add exactly what's needed to broker a deal at any cost. Things like money, ancillaries, and gifts. Think of it like handing the whole thing over to your mandarins to resolve. Something about it feels rather desperate, but it's useful if you don't want to spend ages tinkering with an agreement. Spying is one of the elements of the game that feels wholly new, but you'll have to wait a little while before you can build your undercover network. You don't get the option to recruit spies until you reach the rank of Second Marquis. If you're wondering why the option is greyed out, that's why. This shouldn't take you too long, probably around 2 hours or so if you auto-resolve battles, you monster, but there is a quicker way. The Philosophy and Trade branch of the Reforms tree has a perk called Masterful Disguise Techniques. This is worth grabbing early if espionage is part of your strategy. To access this chain, you'll need to upgrade one of your settlements to a small city, which in turn allows you to build a country school. You'll then have to choose the Private Tutors reform, which precedes Masterful Disguise Techniques. Unlock this and you'll get an extra spy slot, and espionage actions against you will be more expensive for rival factions. Also, it conjures up images of a man in a fake moustache and glasses, which is rather pleasing. Characters who can spy are represented by the little eye icon that appears on their profile. Once you've picked them, you have to choose who they're going to spy on and wait a couple of turns for them to be inducted. We're not going to go into the way espionage actions work here, but there are a few things worth considering. Firstly, you should be aware that some espionage actions have follow-up events that may require you to spend more of your cover points. If you're trying to secure a military position, you might have to spend more cover points to prove you're up to the task. Secondly, you should keep an eye on how long your agent spends with an enemy faction. There's a chance they'll defect if you leave them there for too long. And finally, if you want your spy to hold a position of authority in an enemy faction, you might need to make room for them. And the easiest way of doing this is by killing some enemy characters. Just don't accidentally kill your own spy. Characters are the backbone of 3 Kingdoms. There's never been a Total War game with such an emphasis on who you recruit and what makes them happy. With that in mind, it's important to know how to best manage your heroes. Open up a character's info panel and you can see exactly what motivates them and which characters they have relationships with. Friends are on the left, foes on the right. The little speech bubble will show you the specifics of each relationship. And remember that if your hero is in a retinue with a character they dislike, you can simply swap them out for someone who's a better fit by hitting the Swap Selected Retinue button. It'll cost you money, but it's better than splintering an army. On a related note, managing satisfaction in Three Kingdoms is essential. Open up your character panel on the right-hand side of the screen, and you can sort your heroes in order of satisfaction, although the game will prompt you when a character is unhappy. Hover over the face icon and you can see exactly when they're dissatisfied. In many cases, a better court position will fix the problem. You can't make court appointments until you reach the rank of Second Marquis, and even then, only 2 slots open up, so you may need to use the Promote option to provide a quick temporary fix if you want to make your most valuable characters feel special. Once you can make court appointments, you'll be able to see exactly what effect the placement will have on their satisfaction in this preview window. Alternatively, where possible, stick your characters in an army with your faction leader by using the swap option we detailed before. As long as their traits align, there will be benefits for them having to fight alongside each other. It's a vivid, characterful way of building relationships. Your economy in Three Kingdoms requires careful management, perhaps more so than any other Total War game. If you build recklessly and maintain massive standing armies, you'll soon find yourself without 2 coins to rub together. But the beauty of Three Kingdoms is that it gives you some thoughtful tools for managing your finances. Whenever you build a structure, pay close attention to the type of income it generates. Things like industry, silk, and spices are all distinct. To make the most money, you should build structures that complement your primary sources of income. When you control an entire commandery, the Three Kingdoms term for provinces, you can put your characters on assignments that add another layer of financial synchronicity. These work like commandments from previous Total War games, but they're implemented via specific characters. Before you assign a character, hover over their traits to see which ones work best with your source of income. Lady Bian, for instance, provides a tax collecting buff to money earned via peasantry. That makes her a great assignee for the commandery in this example, thanks to its high income from peasantry buildings. On top of this, there are reforms that can further maximise your income from specific sources. These things should always be in the back of your scheming mind when you're upgrading. Make your money work in harmony. Finally, on the subject of finance, don't forget to disband armies and recall characters when things get tight. Units can be disbanded just like any other Total War game, but you can also recall generals you don't need by clicking on their profile and then on the recall button. They'll go back into the recruitment pool so you don't lose them, and it's a quick way of saving cash if their upkeep is crippling you. Likewise, characters from your court can also be released from service if you can no longer afford to pay their wages. Harsh, but necessary. Like many other aspects of Three Kingdoms, effective management is about picking the right people for the right job. This extends to your characters, both on the battlefield and off it. You can explore each of your characters' abilities by opening up their info pane and looking at their attributes and skills.
For reunification, strike hard!
Each attribute offers a campaign buff and a military buff. Resolve, for instance, increases your general's health in battle, but also increases population growth. Cunning, meanwhile, gives your ranged troops more ammunition in battle and contributes to your overall military supplies. Be aware that authority is the most important skill for characters in positions of responsibility, such as faction leaders, heirs, and prime ministers. By picking complementary skills, you can increase your character's traits and prime them to perform specific roles in your campaign. But this also gives you a degree of flexibility when it comes to leveling them up, so you can build the retinue you want.
Stand ready!
And if you manage to increase any of their attributes to 200, they'll become legendary characters with their names shown in gold. Shiny, shiny. And finally, remember that everything in Three Kingdoms is color-coded for simplicity. If your character's highest attributes are blue and yellow, it'll benefit you to build strategies around complementary colors with things like their retinue, which we'll talk about next. Your armies, like everything else in Three Kingdoms, are built around characters. Each character has a retinue, and every army is built up of 3 retinues. The units you recruit are attached to the character, not the army, so if that character leaves or you recall them, the units go with them. The color-coded system we just mentioned is especially important when it comes to recruitment. Different classes and character traits enhance the abilities of specific units. Strategists, shown in blue, offer ammunition buffs to ranged units, for instance, whereas vanguards in red benefit shock cavalry. This doesn't mean you can't have any of the other types of unit in their retinue, and in fact, some characters will offer decent buffs to more than one type of troop, but you'll be better off recruiting to match your specific attributes. And by building an army with a decent range of character classes, you can create the most effective, versatile fighting force. You'll unlock more unit types for your characters as they level up, rather than via complicated building construction chains. And remember, there's also a comparison mode, which you can use by pressing this button, which will allow you to hover over other units and assess their suitability. Choose wisely and rule justly. And that's your lot. 6 things every potential ruler should consider when charging into Total War 3 Kingdoms. Please help us out by hitting that like button if you found any of this useful, and subscribe to the channel for more weekly shows and features. And if you're already subbed, smash that notification bell so you know when our next video is ready for battle.